All right, so in this question we are looking at drawing this hollow shape, this hollow triangle where the vertical size is controlled by the user. So they're going to enter a number and it's going to draw a shape like this. So just looking at the picture here, I am assuming that the user is going to enter the number 8 to generate this triangle. So if you look down, there are 8 stars down this way. And if we're always looking for patterns, if you count this way, there are also 8 stars that way. Okay, so that size is going to determine how big our triangle is. Now, I see 3 distinct parts to this particular question. I see this top star here, and then I see this middle portion here, and then I see the bottom part there. Like, you can't just use a single kind of nested loop to do this solution because not everything is repeating itself consistently, right? So there'll be kind of a nested loop to do this middle section because there's always 2 stars separated by a certain number of spaces. But the top star doesn't follow that pattern, and neither does the bottom. So how I think I'll approach this is, because I think this will be fairly straightforward and this will be fairly straightforward. So let's do those first, and then making sure our pattern is lined up, and then we'll work on the middle stars here. Okay. So first step, let's get the size from the user. So enter the size. Okay, so here I'm doing the top. So there's spaces before that star, so I'm doing the top line, I guess. All right, so I got to do spaces before that star, and I have to print a star. Okay, so and they have to line up correctly on the bottom, right? Because the bottom line had 8 stars to it. So I need one less star than one less space than the size that was entered from the keyboard. So if I'm just printing spaces for the top line, then I can start at 1 and go to size -1. So while column is less than or equal to size -1, because I need 1 less, because I got to print the star in the last space. So I'm going to print a space, and I need to keep it on the same line. Okay, and column equals column +1. Okay, so that should print, if I entered 8, it should print 7 spaces, and then we'll print only star. Okay, and I don't need the end equals because I want it to go down to the next line after that. Okay, so this is the top line. Now, just to check that my spacing is correctly, I'm going to do the bottom line next. Now, I'm going to have to put my middle section in here when I'm done, but this is a pretty straightforward loop because it's just printing the amount of time size is. So we'll do column equals 1, while column is less than or equal to size. We will just print the asterisks. Okay, it needs to stay on the same line. Okay, so if I've done this correctly, then what do I do? Oops, column +1. Okay, so if I enter 8, right, so that's good. So I am seeing, right, that star show up at the very end, and any other number should do the same thing. So if I enter like 3, okay, or 12, okay. So that is, my spacing is correct for those 2 lines. Now I need to do the middle section. So let's go back to our picture and see if we can figure out what this pattern is here. All right, so I need to do my outer loop to do these rows, so from here down to there. So that is going to be 2 less than the size. So I'm going to need a while loop. So here we'll do our middle section. So we'll have, I'm going to start at 1, while row is less than or equal to size minus 2. Okay, because I've already done the top line, I've already done the bottom line. Okay, so I'll have my row equals row plus 1. So there's my loop set up to execute the correct number of times. Now, so what has to happen is there has to be spaces printed before this first star, and then there has to be the star printed, and then there has to be spaces again after the first star, and then a final star printed. Okay, so we've already kind of got a loop that we know how to do the spaces before the star. We just have to reduce the number of spaces that gets printed every time. And there's a pattern between how many spaces we need to reduce and the what row number we're on. So if we were to reduce the size by the row number, that should take us to the correct number of spaces in front of the first star. Now the spaces between the 2 stars here, I'm starting my row at 1, so this is row 1, row 2, row 3. So if I just take away, so for the middle stars, my column number would have to be less than my row to draw the correct number of spaces. If I start at 1 and I'm less than row, then that's going to draw the correct number of spaces between the stars. And then I just have to print out a single star at the end. I think that will work. Okay. It's always about trying to find a pattern between what row you're on and how many across or columns you need to deal with. So in my middle section, I need to do the spaces before the first star. Okay. So I'm going to use a while loop. So column's going to start at 1. So while the column is less than the size minus the row, so that's going to reduce by the correct amount of spaces. And we will print just a space, and we'll keep the cursor on the same line. My column can go up by 1. Okay. So now I'm going to print just the single stars. That's the first one on that middle section. Okay. So print the asterisk. I still need the end equals the blank string to keep it on the same line. Now I've got to do these spaces between the 2 stars. Okay. And we talked about that as if we start at 1 and we are less than the row, because that's the pattern. Okay. Or that's the relationship between the row number and the column value, or the number of spaces that I need to print. So we're going to print a space, keep our cursor on the same line, because I still have to print that final star. Whew. It might be a miracle if this works correctly. We'll see. All right, oh, and I don't need the end equals 1 here because I want it to go to the next line, because this will print. So I've got spaces, star, go to the next line. Okay. Keep doing that until finally this loop is done and it'll print the last part here. Okay, let's see what happens. Oh, of course. Always forget that. Oh, look at that. Okay, so that appears to be drawing correctly. We should probably test that for some other sizes. Oops. Okay. Now, will it break when we have too small of a number? No, it did that one correctly. Okay. What's it going to do when you have 2? Okay. All right. Seems to be okay as well. If you enter 1, I'm not sure. It just doesn't work for that one, but it's not really expected to. Okay, so that one was really complicated. So you got to really start breaking things into smaller sections here so that you can kind of code one section at a time, test, and see whether it works. But these are pretty tough.